release of Ant-Man and the Wasp, we now have 20 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So today we're going to stop and rank all 31 heroes from the worst to the best. As we dive into this, I'm not ranking them based off of their power level, but more based off of character arc, their development, how much they've lived up to their potential inside of the universe, how they've been used inside of these films, that sort of thing. With that in mind, if you're a movie lover that loves to talk with other movie fans, join us down in the comment section. Give us your ranking, or at least your top 10 heroes of the MCU. I'd love to have a nice lively discussion about these characters that we all love. I know for me, I love to talk about these characters in movies all of the time. That's why I use the Marvel Amino to stay connected with other Marvel fans. Marvel Amino is a community within the Amino app with over 100,000 Marvel fans from all over the world. The best part of this app is that you're able to find people who are interested in the same things that you are, and you can chat with them using text or voice or a bunch of different options. And Amino's not just limited to Marvel. There's literally millions of Amino communities. Be sure to download Amino at the link in the description to join the community and start talking movies and Marvel. Once you download the app, be sure to follow me, Sean Chandler Talks About. Also, one more cool thing. Soon I'm going to be doing a live AMA Q&A over on the Marvel Amino. So if you want your questions answered about Marvel movies, be sure to follow the Marvel Amino and check out my YouTube channel for updates on the exact date and time for when that's going to happen. With that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Quicksilver. It breaks my heart to put him here because I feel like he had the potential to be a great, interesting addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We don't have a bunch of speedsters in this universe, so he would have a unique place, especially coming from that position of having been an adversary to the Avengers. Unfortunately, they decided to kill him off as soon as he became a hero, so we never really got the opportunity to get to know his character, expand him, give him a big character arc. It was just as soon as he's redeemed, he's killed off, and so for me, he comes in last place. Coming in at number 30 is War Machine. Now, I enjoy the Rhodey character, but unfortunately, he's never been able to get out of Tony's shadow. He's never stood alone as his own character. He's just kind of Tony's sidekick. Even the way that he's used in Civil War, he's hurt and injured as a way to motivate Tony and give Tony more reason to be angry. And so before that reason, he hasn't been able to stand on his own, somewhat quite literally because his back got broken. But because of that, he comes in next to last place. At number 29 is Nebula. Honestly, I've never particularly cared much for the Nebula character, both as the antagonist or the anti-hero or in Infinity War, she kind of joins teams with the good guys. She's never been particularly compelling to me, even though she has this backstory that ties to Gamora, to Thanos. She has motivation for her actions. She should be a lot more interesting to me than she is, and I think part of that is she just feels kind of like a third-rate Loki that hasn't been handled nearly as well. At 28 is Falcon. This is another character that I actually like the character quite a bit. I think the way that he's played makes him come off strong. He's someone that's not intimidated by Captain America. The only reason he's this low on the list is he's very much a side character to Captain America. He's a sidekick to Captain America. Thus far, the way he's been used, he hasn't gotten that opportunity to be in the spotlight, have his own big character arc. And for that reason, even though I like the character as he has been used, he's not one of the great standout characters yet. 27 is Hawkeye, the most underused member of the original set of Avengers. For whatever reason, they just keep underwriting Hawkeye. Other than in Age of Ultron, where he had the little bit with his family where it's like, see, he's got a backstory. See, he's got a family. Other than that, he's been very underutilized. In the original Avengers, he was a bad guy until the third act of the movie. He doesn't even show up in Infinity War, and they just have some throwaway line covering why he's not in the film. And so even though, once again, Jeremy Renner plays him in a way that makes him interesting, but they haven't done enough with him. Coming in at number 26 is Shuri, another fun character that just brings a youthful energy to these movies, much like, kind of like what Spider-Man does, and having the perspective of a teenager in this world of heroes and supervillains. She brings a youthful, pure innocence to the franchise. The problem here is that, once again, she's a side character to her brother, Black Panther. Granted, she gets in on the action at the end of Black Panther in the third act there. She's also one of the smartest characters in the entire entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, but she hasn't been given her own standalone story yet to kind of develop her and give her a story arc in and of herself. Coming in at number 25 is Wong. Of all the characters on this list, he might have the smallest amount of screen time, and he has one of the more subtle personalities of the list, but at the same time, that's what makes him interesting because he still has such a great screen presence in relationship with Doctor Strange, the way he's able to play off of him without needing to be this big, vibrant personality that screams, pay attention to me. No, it's like the little subtleties and nuances of what he does that makes him interesting in this nice little addition to our list of heroes. And number 24 is Mantis. Now, this is a character that's probably used a little bit too often at the butt end of jokes, but at the same time, she has such a almost sweet relationship with Drax, with the way they interact with one another. And you can see there's this fondness there, even though he's just constantly cutting her down. But at the core of it, that's just who he is. And also her addition to the Guardians just kind of shows the way that they really are this band of orphans coming together, forming a new family. Number 23 is Vision. Now, this is a frustrating one for me because he's such a powerful character with an interesting backstory in his creation with the Infinity Stone and everything involved with it. And then they've underutilized him, especially in Infinity War, where they seem to nerf him in the first act and sideline him for the rest of the movie. I went into that movie thinking he was going to be this major, big part and do some really cool stuff, and instead, he was laying in a bed most of the entire movie. So hopefully we can redeem him and give him more of an arc in future films because there's so much potential here for him to be this amazing, amazing hero. Number 22 is Bucky, or the White Wolf. Now, Bucky is an interesting character because of the arc that he's taken throughout these movies, from being the guy protecting Steve Rogers before he was Captain America, to being a villain in the Winter Soldier that was brainwashed, to an anti-hero, and then being redeemed back again as the White Wolf, battling in Infinity War. But with the character, he's a lot more interesting as the anti-hero or as the villain who's against odds with the guy that he was once protecting, that has such a close relationship with him, than he as the hero, where they haven't seemed to have had a good story arc for him as a hero. So for me, as a villain, he's a lot more compelling than he has been as the White Wolf, so he's a little bit lower on this list. Coming in at number 21 is Baby Groot. Now, they've given him some amazing cute moments with the dancing. They've given him some funny moments, like where he's eating the popcorn. And with Teenage Groot, they even gave him a little bit of a story arc and a little bit of redemption in his actions in that film. At the same time, Baby Groot, Teenage Groot hasn't quite had the heart yet of adult Groot that we had in the first film. And at times, he's been pretty frustrating and annoying, especially in Infinity War, where he's being such a teenager. I was like, oh, he's too teenager right now, that he didn't make him as fun or interesting as for me with what they've done with him thus far. Well, it's still interesting to watch this character grow up before our eyes. So he's a hard one to place on this list, but for me, I feel very comfortable with placing him at number 21. Bringing us into the top 20 is Scarlet Witch. Here's another character that, like Vision, they seem to have wasted the potential. She's got a very interesting backstory. She's such a powerful character since her powers are coming from an Infinity Stone. And then it seems like they sideline her and lock her in buildings for far too much time in these films. Even Okoye called out the fact that they did that in the third act of Infinity War. So this is a character that I'm hoping that in future films can get the spotlight and get her own story arc to shine and really show us what she can do. Coming in at number 19 is Okoye. Now, this is how you do a side character right, as they took her character, gave her a strong story arc in Black Panther by making her represent a way of thinking and a sense of loyalty within the Wakanda government. And that she put that in contrast with her lover within the film, which made for an interesting dynamic. And so this is a character that's only appeared in 2 films, but has made quite an impression in those 2 films, and they've actually explored her and made her have an impact on the stories. So even though she's only a side character, she makes it into our top 20. At number 18 is Nick Fury. During phase 1 and 2 of the MCU, essentially Nick Fury was the glue tying all of these characters together. He was the mechanism by which the Avengers were assembled, brought back together, introduced to this whole idea of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything going on. And then as we moved into phase 3, he kind of went off to the sidelines and hasn't been making so many appearances for the last little bit of time. And we also haven't dug too much deeper, so I'm hoping when we get into Captain Marvel, and they're apparently doing some de-aging engaging. We're going to get to see him in the 90s, that we can get a little bit under the surface and get to know a little bit more about him. Because, of course, when you got Samuel L. Jackson, you've got a screen presence. He is memorable. But I want to get a little bit deeper. Number 17 is Rocket Raccoon. This is one of the most ludicrous characters on this entire list, and at times he's one of the most likable, and other times he's one of the most annoying and most hateable. And they found ways with just little lines of dialogue to give us a bunch of ideas into his psyche and into his background, and they haven't needed to spend a ton of time doing it. Just little, well-written lines of dialogue can say so much about who he is and why he does the things that he does. Now, some of the things that he does drive me crazy and might have perhaps made me really not like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, so maybe he's a little bit lower than he might have been otherwise, but in other times, I love this character. Coming in at number 16 is the Wasp. Now, this is a fun character because she's essentially been groomed from childhood to turn into a superhero, and then in the first Ant-Man, we saw her being held back by her father who didn't want her to become a superhero because of the past, and this just makes for a very interesting little arc that her character has over the span of these two films. As we move into the second one where she actually gets to be the Wasp, we see her as someone that's far more competent as a fighter and even using the abilities of her costume than Ant-Man is, of course, because he's kind of new to all of this stuff. And so this just makes for a very interesting vibe. They get to make her someone that has a sensitive side, but has a very strong side. So all in all, a very well-rounded character that I'm excited to see what they do with her in future films. Number 15 is Loki. I've always debated, do I want to put Loki on my heroes list or not? But after Infinity War, it's hard to not include him at some point in time. He is the ultimate side changer, flip-flopper inside of the MCU, as sometimes he has been the villain, killing many people, and other times he's teamed up with Thor to battle bad guys. And over his last couple of appearances within the MCU, he pretty clearly teamed up on the right side to redeem himself. Now, I think he's a little bit more interesting when he's not the hero, so I don't want to go full top 10 with the character, but he certainly is one of the more interesting characters that have all these little nuances to his relationship with all the people around him, so he does make it into the top 15. Coming in at number 14 is Starlord. Now, this is a character that I wish I could put in the top 10, because if I based it purely around the original Guardians of the Galaxy, he's easily top 10 for me. I love Chris Pratt, the personality, the anti-hero, the guy that kind of gets slowly pulled into the world of trying to do the right thing, his mysterious background, who is he, and his obsession with small details about his past like a little Walkman, all that makes him so interesting to me and compelling. And then his last two films that he's appeared in, it feels like they've underutilized him. Because then when you have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, he's just trying to find his dad and relate to his dad. They don't actually give him much heroic to do because he's playing catch with his dad. And then they make him one of the mechanisms by which Thanos kind of escapes in Infinity War. His brokenness, his kind of fault are the reason he got away. And so if you're making a list of him as a hero, not just him as a character, they've shown way more of his faults and weaknesses in these last two films than kind of that redemptive, heroic side that we saw in the first film. So I can't bring him into the top 10 based off his last couple of appearances. Hopefully Infinity War Part 2 or whatever that movie ends up being called, he can get back to doing some heroic things, and so he can crack that top 10 next go round. Number 13 is Ant-Man. What I love about Ant-Man is that he's a character that just seems like a good, normal guy that's gotten pulled up into this world of superheroes. He did some crimes when he was younger. He gets recruited by this guy that introduces him this idea of becoming a superhero, and he just kind of gets dragged along into it. He's easily influenced by the people around him, so if Captain America asks him to fly to Europe to battle Iron Man, he just kind of says yes to it. And that kind of is an endearing quality to him. He's just a nice guy that wants to be helpful and do the right thing, and isn't very good at doing the right thing, and so it's gotten him and the people around him in a lot of trouble. He also has just really kind of sweet and cute relationships with the people around him, whether you're talking about with his daughter or the romance with Hope. All of it just makes him feel like the most down-to-earth, normal person on this entire list that you just He's the ones you want to hang out with and get to know him a little bit more, like your neighbor or something like that. At number 12 is Groot. Even weirder than Rocket Raccoon is our talking tree, Groot. And what they managed to do is take this character that can only say one phrase and is kind of dim-witted in other sorts of ways and make him this just beloved character that has all these cute moments, has all these vicious moments, and then has one of the most heartfelt moments in the entire MCU with his sacrifice at the end of the original Guardians of the Galaxy, where he decides to sacrifice himself for the sake of his family. And they find a way to take a line as cheesy as "We are Groot" and make it work. They find a way that after a sacrifice that you have a talking raccoon holding a plant with a little twig in it, and you feel the emotion of that. That's masterful storytelling and crafting of characters when they can take the character that can only say "I am Groot" and make you care that much. This character is one of those heart and soul characters for me. Coming in at number 11 is Gamora. If you tuned into my previous version of this video, you know that she is our most improved player. I had her next to last on my previous video because I didn't feel like they'd given her a story yet. She was just kind of the straight man character to the insanity of the rest of the Guardians, and they alluded to how interesting her backstory was, but they hadn't shown us. And then we got Infinity War, and they dug in deep, and we got to understand what was going on with her and Thanos. What was that relationship like? And that's so much of what made him great, and it made her character so much more interesting as you understand the pain of her history. How did she become this assassin? Why does she have this very conflicted, deep emotions towards him? And how does Nebula play into the mix of all this? Infinity War just made her so much better of a character for me. And now whenever I rewatch the first two Guardians movies, I'm excited to see kind of how much it fills out the details on some of that stuff. Bringing us into the top 10 is Black Widow. Now, this is a character that in no individual film has gotten this big, gigantic story arc to flesh out the character. But what they've wisely done is sprinkled her in all the way back to just the third film in the MCU, and they keep giving us little additional information about her backstory, her relationship, and advancing her character in small little increments that by the time we've gotten to this point in time, we have a very good idea of who she is, why she is the way she is, and how she has these kind of interesting connections to the other characters at different times and in different ways. And a lot of that is what makes her so interesting and compelling to me. At number 9 is Yondu. For me, he's kind of like the subtle standout of the MCU. In the original Guardians of the Galaxy, he wasn't really a villain, but he was certainly an antagonist to our Guardians, and he stole every scene that he was in. He just had this screen presence that was charming, funny, in the way he handled other characters that just stood out. And then what they did brilliantly in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which it's well known I have many problems with that film, but they gave him this great story arc and backstory that helped you understand his relationship to Starlord, why he was the way he was, that this a wonderful redemptive arc leading up to kind of these great moments with him and Starlord, where each of them have kind of big realizations about their connections to each other. And number 8 is Drax. Now for me, this character is just a personal favorite. If you want to call me biased for having this high, I'll say you are totally correct. But for me, he's one of those characters that I just fell in love with the first time I watched Guardians of the Galaxy, and just the experience of his sense of humor, the way he interacts with other characters, the way he interprets the universe around him, his motivation with his family, and then discovering this new family in the Guardians, all of that just works for me. He's a character that on many levels is very simplistic, inherently to the way he is written. He is very simplistic, and that's the charm of him. Number 7 is Doctor Strange. Now here's a character that the more time we spend with him, the more time I just fall in love with this character. In his original movie, I dug him, I liked him, but the way the story's designed is that we get a lot of time with him when he's just normal Doctor Strange, and then only by the time we get to him being Doctor Strange, we've moved into the third act and he's moved into kind of action and just doing stuff rather than getting to sit there with his personality. So when we get him in Infinity War and he's going back and forth with Tony Stark, and we're getting to see him kind of, shifting into using the Mind Stone to see all these different possibilities. I mean, I just fell in love with him in a new way because of that movie, and I just cannot wait for a Doctor Strange 2 where we get to dig in deeper to this hero Doctor Strange. And number 6 is Hulk. Now, this is one of those characters that they've struggled a little bit to figure out exactly how to use the character. They started off by giving him his own movie that was somewhat mixed in how it was received by people. Some of that being that it was an early film in the MCU, and so they were still figuring out the tone of the entire universe. But as the character's gone along, they've just figured out how to use him as this side character that so well complements the characters around him. His crowning, his high point in this entire franchise being that third act in the original Avengers film, which was just so much fun to get to see his character just shine and tear up an entire army of Chitauri, beating up Loki. This is a character that, when used right, is awesome to see on screen. Bringing us into the top 5 is Spider-Man. Finally, one of the most beloved characters in the Marvel canon made it into the MCU in Civil War, and they found a way to both distinguish him from the previous versions of Spider-Man as well as other characters in the MCU by giving him such a high schooler's perspective on this universe. They found a way to give us an interesting new take on the character that's purely a high schooler, so innocent in his interpretation of the events around him and his attitude towards technology, and even the way that he decides to tag along with Tony Stark into outer space. And so for him, he easily makes it into the top 5. And number 4 is Thor. Now, this is probably the most inconsistently written character on this entire list, as sometimes he's played very straight in, say, Shakespearean. Other times he's played full-on comedy like in Ragnarok. And so it's a little bit uneven at times the way he's characterized, but at the same time, they've given him some of the richest and most in-depth character arcs out of any of these characters. If you just look at the journey he's gone on from the original Thor, where he is this prince in this kingdom that's filled with arrogance, to Infinity War, where he's lost almost everything. This is a character that has been given an arc, been developed, been taken on very much this gigantic, truly epic story that has brought us to where he is at the end of Infinity War. Coming in 3rd place on our list is Black Panther. Of the characters here, he's one of the few that comes into this universe fully formed. He was born and raised to become Black Panther, and we see kind of that final transition with the death of his father in Civil War of him becoming both the hero and the king, and that's kind of what makes him distinct out of these characters. But he has that extra layer to him of being over a kingdom. He's not all about personality. He's not a broken character that needs this big gigantic character arc. He's someone that does the right thing because he's been raised to do that, and now he's being put in these impossible situations where he must overcome evil. Now, as we come to my top 2, there's a bit of a rivalry in my mind between these top 2 options. Both of them are great. I go back and forth in my head as to which one's on top, but today our runner-up is Captain America. Now, this is a great character. What I love about him is that he is principle-based, all the way from when he's a little grown man being beaten up in an alley. He is all about good old-fashioned values, and throughout the course of his original film, he's given the power to actually help bring those values to the world. He hates bullies. He wants to stop bullies, and that principle drives his action throughout all of these films. And because he has such a distinct worldview, it puts him in conflict and contrast with other people. In particular, as you go into Civil War, the reason that he got knocked back from number 1 to number 2 in this list as opposed to in my previous list is because they didn't really do anything with him coming out of Civil War. In Infinity War, he's kind of shortchanged in the story department in that film. So it's very possible that once we get that next movie, it'll up him. He'll get bumped up to that top spot. But as for right now, he got bumped out by our new number 1, who is Tony Stark, Iron Man. The character that kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe has really been given a very profound character arc throughout these films, as you see him in the original film as this playboy that discovers the folly of his ways and decides to use his brilliance to try and stop the evil that he's brought into the world. And as you kind of progress through phases 1 and 2, he's trying to leave the superhero business. He wants these drone suits to be able to do his work for him. He wants Ultron to be able to make it so that he can retire. And then you get to Infinity War, and he can't stop. He's changed so much on the inside that he cannot allow something to happen. He cannot quit being Iron Man. He's such a different person from who he was in that original film. That's a powerful, profound arc that just, like, even talking about it, I get a little bit emotional. So for me, because of what they did in Infinity War with his character, he bumped up all the way into that top spot. So for today, he is my #1 MCU hero. How about you? Tell me your list down below in the comment section. Really, if you love to talk movies with other movie fans, I'd love it if you join it and talk movies with us down there in the comment section. Please do so respectfully. These are movies that we all love, characters that we all love. No reason to be rude to one another. Also, remember to download that Amino app. Follow the Marvel Amino and follow the Sean Chandler Talks About Aminos over there so you can find out about that live Q&A AMA that's coming up very shortly, and I'd love it if you would tune in for that. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So join me down in the comment section. Let's have a lively yet respectful conversation. If you've already subscribed, consider ringing that bell so you get notifications whenever I post new videos. You could be one of the first people down in the comment section kicking off that conversation. And as always, thank you so much for watching.